Well, good morning, friends. So, the product of the day is listing of Indian insurance companies on stock exchange. This is the topic of the discussion today. Listing of Indian insurance companies on stock exchange. Let's understand. On March 20th, 2024, the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India notified the IRDAI registration, capital structure, transfer of shares and amalgamation of insurers regulations 2024. That means there is called registration of capital regulations, which consolidated and rationalized the regulatory framework applicable on an Indian insurer in aspects including listing on a stock exchange pursuant to an initial public offer, that is IPO, that may consist of a fresh issue of equity shares or an offer for sale. So the detailed analysis on the other aspect of registration and capital regulations must be understood. In fact, the issue or the transfer of shares by an Indian insurer pursuant to an IPO was initially governed by the IRDAI issuance of capital by Indian insurance companies transacting life insurance business regulations 2015. And the IRDAI issuance of capital by Indian insurance companies transacting other than life insurance business regulations 2015 for life insurer and general insurers respectively. So the issuance of capital regulations was done according to these regulations. Now the issuance of capital regulations have been repealed by the registration and capital regulations. Currently, the IRDAI prescribed requirements for IPO and listing of Indian insurers are covered under the registration and capital regulations, read with the Master Circular on registration, capital structure, transfer of shares and amalgamation of insurers 2024, issued by the IRDAI on May 15, 2024. Now, the key changes to the regulatory framework applicable on listing of an Indian insurer under the registration and capital regulations. The impact of such changes on Indian insurers and whether these changes may encourage listing of Indian insurers on a stock exchange, that we will see. Here, the salient difference of the registration and capital regulations vis-a-vis the issuance of capital regulations can be seen because under the registration of capital regulations, the compliance requirements of an insurer for undertaking an IPO and listing on stock exchanges have undergone extensive changes such that the IRDAI has minimal regulatory intervention in connection with the IPO. So the key changes are discussed here. Say, for example, listing of equity shares on stock exchanges recognized by International Financial Services Center Authority, that is called IFSCA, International Financial Services Centers Authority. So under the IFSCA issuance and listing of securities regulation 2021, that is called IFSCA issuance and listing regulations, an entity incorporated in India can list on stock exchanges recognized by the IFSCA. Further, an insurance company registered with the IRDAI can undertake insurance in the International Financial Services Center, means GIFT City, if it is registered with the IFSCA. For more details on the insurance landscape in IFSCA, we can see certain other aspects also. That is, previously, under the issuance of capital regulations, an insurer could only undertake an IPO and list on stock exchange recognized by the Security and Exchange Board of India. That is SEBI. That is BSE Limited and the National Stock Exchange of India Limited. So, pursuant to the SEBI issue of capital and disclosure requirements regulations 2018, that is called SEBI ICDR regulations, the IRDAI framework did not permit an answer when insurer registered with the IRDAI and engaging in insurance business in India to list its equity shares in a stock exchange recognized by the IFSC. So, under the registration and capital regulations, the restriction has been lifted since Regulation 29 of the Registration and Capital Regulations uses the inclusive term financial sector regulator, thereby allowing Indian insurer to list their equity shares on stock exchanges recognized by SEBI, SEBI, and the IFSC. So, therefore, the requirements prescribed in the Regulation 29 arrived with the 2024 Master Circular will be applicable to insurers listing on stock exchange recognized by the IFSC as well, in the manner that is simplification of IRDAI approval requirement. Now the IRDAI wide the registration and capital regulations has done away with the requirement of seeking prior IRDAI approval for an IPO and replaced it with the requirement to seek IRDAI approval under Section 6A(4) of the Insurance Act 1938. So only for the issue and transfer of equity shares in excess of the specified share thresholds pursuant to the IPO, IRDAI approval is required to be sought in the format of IRDAI or TOS that is provided under the 2024 Master Circular, so which is applicable for all other issuances and transfers in excess of the limits prescribed under Section 6A, subsection 4 of the Insurance Act. So further, in terms of the provision to Regulation 29, subsection 5 of the Registration and Capital Regulations, the insurer is specifically exempted from providing transferee or relative details if such form is being filled in connection with the IPO and listing. Although the exposure draft of the Registration and Capital Regulations suggested that an insurer could approach the relevant financial sector regulator for filing the offer documents once an application seeking IRDAI approval under Section 6A, subsection 4 of the Insurance Act is made in terms of Regulation 29, subsection 5 of the Registration and Capital Regulations. It is clear that prior IRDAI approval under Section 6A, subsection 4 of the Insurance Act is required before initiating any filing with the relevant financial sector regulator for listing. Now, these rationalization measures provide substantial relaxation to insurers in comparison to the approval required under the erstwhile issuance of capital regulations, which mandated prior IRDAI approval for IPO and required insurers to submit a host of information, along with applications such as detailed information on the insurer's financial and solvency position, expenses of management, and number of customer complaints, and other business performance parameters. So, in addition, insurers were required to furnish declarations and undertakings on compliance with the guidelines for corporate governance for insurers in India issued by the IRDAI on May 18, 2016, and compliance with Indian Insurance Companies Foreign Investment Rules 2015. Another principle-based approach is ground of consideration to be adopted by the IRDAI. Then the disclosure requirements are there. The issuance of capital requirement prescribed elaborated disclosure requirement to be made in the offer document in addition to those prescribed under the SEBI ICDR regulations, including vis-a-vis specific risk factors, financial statements, information in relation to the issue and the issuer. So under the registration and capital regulations, the IRDAI has not prescribed any disclosure requirements for offer documents to be filed in connection to the IPO, including that insurer will be guided by regulations issued by the concerned financial sector regulator, that is SEBI, IFSCA in this regard. So the procedure for listing is very simple. Let's see. Presently, the steps to be undertaken by an Indian company, including an Indian insurer in respect of an IPO and subsequent listing, is primarily governed by the SEBI ICDR regulations. For listing on SEBI recognized stock exchanges and the IFSCA issuance, and listing regulations for listing on IFSCA recognized stock exchanges. So the IRDAI has supplemented this for Indian insurers through requirements provided under the registration and capital regulations. The key ones are approval from IRDAI before approaching SEBI or the IFSCA for issuing, transferring equity shares provision to an IPO. Then IRDAI to be intimated at least 15 days prior to filing of the offer documents with SEBI or IFSCA, and then IRDAI to be intimated regarding all subsequent developments in connection with the IPO and listing of the insurers. Then the IRDAI has adopted a principle-based approach in line with the mandate of the Regulations Review Committee formed for the purpose of revising the applicable regulatory framework, such that the process of IPO approval and listing of an insurer is substantially rationalized and relaxed. So the new streamlined regulatory framework also helps to reduce the burden on both the regulator and the regulated entity in terms of the ensuring or assessing compliance. Further, it is recommendable that the new regulations have increased the avenues available to Indian insurers to raise capital by enabling listing on IFSCA recognized stock exchanges. So the current regulatory regime provides soft incentives to insurers to list in the form of simplified application process, no lock-in on shares, deemed approval for transfer of up to the 5%, reduced minimum promoter holding requirement, and a streamlined listing approval process. So better standards of corporate governance and creating a roadmap for insurers to become less promoter dependent appear to be the objective behind nudging insurers to undertake initial public offerings, subject to making conditions and strategic interest of joint ventures, partners of insurance compliances. It is likely that Indian insurers will favorably consider the idea of going public in the foreseeable future. Thank you. Thank you very much.